Parents are facing up to 7 years in jail if they don't let their children change gender under new plans put forward by the SNP. Scotland is looking at implementing a ban on conversion therapy, which would criminalise any actions designed to change or suppress the gender identity of another individual, and any action that causes another individual physical harm or psychological distress. So, here to discuss these proposals, I'm joined by Senior Legal Communications Officer at ADF and proud Scot, Lois McLatchie Miller. So tell me, Lois, people are confused because the Scottish Government is saying they want to ban conversion therapy. We think of conversion therapy as hooking gay men up to electrodes back in the 1960s to force... You know, it's not the same thing, is it?
It's not the same thing. This bill is purported to be tackling these things, which are already illegal, and by good sense, of course.
Yes.
But what this bill really tackles is common sense parenting and guiding advice. This bill, as has hit the headlines, would indeed put parents at risk of going to prison for 7 years if they were to refuse their child a gender transition. One of the examples that were given in the text about such criminal behaviour would be if your child, say your 11-year-old son, comes down for school in the morning and he's dressed in a skirt, lipstick and heels, and you say, no, go and change, son, you're not going to be wearing that today. If you were to do that, to repeat it more than twice, then you too could be up for this criminal offence, separated from your children and facing 7 years in prison. So it's a very severe law.
So realistically, because a lot of people would look at that and think there's no way, there's no way a court would actually send a parent to prison for 7 years. Is it feasible?
According to the proposals that have been put out for a public consultation this week, that is indeed what would happen. It's interesting that 7 years, it has a kind of religious connotation, doesn't it? Christians think of seven days that God made the world. I think it's Sikhism, there's 7 steps to prosperity, and now in Scottish wokeism, there's 7 years to go to jail if you refuse to transition your children.
It's certainly, I believe, a form of religious conviction, the woke movement. I do think there is something to that. But look, it does sound absolutely incredible. But parents who are trying to... I mean, we know from, for example, the Cass Review, that the idea of even social transitioning, as in adopting pronouns and names of a child which are not what they were given at birth, that actually that's not a neutral act. It can actually be quite a dangerous thing. All of the evidence is saying we shouldn't do that. So parents are being told, don't do that. And then the government is saying, but if you follow what the Cass Review and other experts say, you're breaking the law. Is that right?
It's absolutely crazy. So this allows state intervention into that relationship between parent and child in a really unprecedented way. And it follows this trajectory that has happened over the last few years in Scotland especially, but across the West, where adults are being treated as children, and children given the power to make decisions about their lives that adults should have. Parents should be empowered to be guiding children through this very tricky Generation Alpha. They have enough challenges as it is parenting, and now they're being scared to death of being separated from their children if they say something against what the government believes to be right. It's absolutely insane.
I don't want this to sound offensive, but what is it about Scotland? Because if you go back to... The Scottish Government were trying to implement that parent scheme where every child would have a named... sort of like an ambassador with the government, sort of get involved. I mean, that didn't go through.
That failed.
But they tried.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It follows a trajectory that just wants to intervene in that relationship between parent and child, and it doesn't make any sense at all. And remember, also, we had the hate speech law, which went past through Parliament a couple of years ago, also threatening 7 years in prison for even discussing these issues in a way that would be deemed illegal around a kitchen table.
Yes.
So the intervention is quite severe, but we are at the consultation phase, so it's really important that everybody across Scotland gets involved in responding to this consultation, which will allow them to have their voices heard and say every part of this bill is not welcome in Scotland. I should say also there's a criminal aspect to what this law would bring forward, but there's also a civil aspect. If you don't meet the threshold, but you might pose a risk of accidentally saying something, potentially in the future, that could be construed as this conversion therapy, there's a civil protection order that can be put in place too, which prevent somebody from meeting you at a specific place, say, for example, a church. So it's very, very far-reaching to say ahead of time that somebody might say something, and that should be criminalised.
I mean, this is just the definition of authoritarianism, isn't it?
It really is. I wish it was a joke, but it's sadly, satire becomes real life.
Absolutely horrific, but thank you so much for telling us about it and depressing us all. Lois, thanks for coming to the show.